Most of us recognize on a daily basis that we remain in sin. Chris explains in this segment how Jesus actually takes your sin and uses it to save you, and how this is made most evident in the Lord's Supper.
Last week we talked about God trapping us in our sin in order to forgive us. He uses your sin to forgive you. Remember? And so we've talked a little bit about this, his language of use of testament in the Lord's Supper. So let me go through this again. In the night in which he was betrayed, our Lord Jesus took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body given for you. Do this for the remembrance of me." Again after supper, he took the cup and gave thanks and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and drink. This cup is a new testament." Testament is the word that is used in the Scriptures. It can also be translated covenant, but testament is what Paul is talking about here. Why? It is a last will and testament that Jesus is making out this evening in front of his disciples. And he's going to hand over his last will and testament. Now, I often do this with my students at Augustana College. I pull out a little sheet of paper and I write down on it, anybody who has now participated watching either online or in person this video series on freedom of a Christian, on the day that I die, will receive all of my dirty underwear. And I just signed it. So, if I go outside now and get hit by the bus, what do you get? All of my dirty underwear. Did you want it? Did you ask for it? Were you looking for it? Were you expecting it? Is it yours nonetheless? Done deal the day I die. This is what last will and testaments do. So now Jesus goes and he says, "This is the New Testament in my blood, shed for you." What's the inheritance? It's not underwear. For the forgiveness of your sin. That's the inheritance. So he says this, and then what happens to him? He goes off and dies. Now here's an interesting little twist. Do the disciples keep him from dying? No. In fact, we say it this way. On the night in which he was betrayed. In order for them to receive the inheritance, he had to die. They actually ended up being his betrayers. Why would we say that? If you don't sin against Christ, what don't you get? Forgiveness. His forgiveness. You don't need it. So when you are standing up there on Sunday morning receiving his body and blood, do you know what you are receiving? The forgiveness of your sin for having done what to him? Betraying him. This is a little different than having a Happy Meal, right? Or something that's a great Thanksgiving that you invite everybody to. No, this is actually receiving the forgiveness of your sin because you are a participant and betrayer. So then when Peter did deny him 3 times, yes, he was actually had to do this in order for Jesus to give him the very thing Peter needed the most. This is what we talk about, being trapped in your sin. Jesus uses your sin against him to save you. You sinned against him, and he uses it now to save you. Traps you in your sin. So how much righteousness do you have left when it comes to Jesus? Can you say, but Jesus, I've got one more yet? No. That's it. And when you take communion, that's what's happening. So the Lord's Supper, Christ is using our sin to save us, traps us, in order to what? Free you. So if you feel like a bound will is a bad thing to have, well, He's binding you so that you can be free. Actually, if he left you to your own devices, which is what Paul talks about in Romans 1, leave you to your own will, you will walk away from God. But he actually comes and traps you now. He binds your will, so you can't do it anymore.